Hades is a game that I adore. It has sharp gameplay, incredible voice acting, it's oozing with style. What really hooked me was how clever the story was. It made being a roguelike game have meaning for the characters in the world. Developer Supergiant made something brilliant. So why am I less excited for Hades 2? It's finally out. Well, except that Hades 2 was an early access video game, so actually it's been kind of out for a year and a half already. As you can tell, I'm not a fan of early access, and that's mainly what this video is about, but keep watching because the fans of Hades shared some great responses to this, and I'd love to know what you think too. Especially about being a timed console exclusive for the Nintendo Switch. I find that very questionable. So first off, what even is early access? Well, developers share an unfinished game with anyone who wants to try it, then they use that data to balance gameplay or to test for bugs. It's kind of like an ongoing beta test that saves the company money because they might not need to hire quality control or playtesting teams. In fact, developers often make money through early access because most of these games have a price on them, which makes them kind of like pre-orders. And if you get the community involved, the early access process means that you're going to be pleasing people who you want to please, your target audience, the people who are likely to buy your game and recommend it to their friends. So all this sounds pretty great, but if that's the case, why don't most developers use early access? Well, there's lots of reasons. First off, most games just aren't great fits for this. If you care about your narrative, you can't just trickle out the plot because you're going to be ruining the emotional payoffs. If there are dramatic moments, the last thing you want to do is spoil that months or even years before the game releases. If you're a big studio or even just a known quantity, you care about reputation. You don't want there to be footage of your game with bugs unless you're Game Freak. It's worth it to hire dedicated teams for that, to help polish your game in secret. Hype is a fickle thing. And indeed, most marketing strategies would rather have a single massive launch that's way easier for them to market than a slow trickle of updates. After all, is there really a distinction between an exciting launch and, I don't know, the final patch in a long series of patches? You also don't want to give up creative control. There might be thousands of players giving feedback and then expecting or even demanding that their changes be made. There are plenty of armchair developers out there. If you have real creative vision, it should be yours, not the public's. And heaven forbid you promise anything that you can't keep. Take a look at Mighty Number 9 and see how that fared. Finally, interacting with a player base takes dedicated resources. You might save money on playtesting, but in exchange, you're signing up for community management. You're constantly patching, you're listening to feedback, you're writing developer logs, you're building roadmaps to the release date on top of actually making the game. That's a lot of work. So there's many reasons to not like early access, but the biggest of all, it often feels like a cash grab. I'll be honest, when I first heard that Hades 2 was an early access game, I thought, Supergiant Games, are you guys not confident in your skills? You've made a great game already, one that I and so many others love, so why dilute your vision? Why spoil the hype? Well, to answer this in true Millennial fashion, I hope I'm pronouncing that right. I am Greek, I should really know how to do that. Let's go back in time. It's now the year 2018, and Hades 1 is released as an early access experiment on the Epic Game Stores, not even on Steam initially. That's right, there is a history of Hades having early access. Remember all those negative things I said about early access? Well, they're not necessarily true of Hades. The biggest difference, in my opinion, is the creative team here at Supergiant. Hades has a bold, stylized aesthetic, and while many characters did have placeholder models, the fans were not involved with the game's visual or the game's story. Supergiant kept firm creative control, and that's been the case with Hades 2. The next thing is, Hades is a roguelike. These are games where you fail and you start over. There's not necessarily a final run. You can always roll again. This actually works pretty well with early access because there's like 100 different abilities to choose from, and ideally, as a game developer, you want all of them to be viable, at least in their own way. Balancing that is extremely difficult without the help of many players and their feedback. It's not like League of Legends where you've got a huge player base that you can easily draw upon data. This is a single player game, and that's expected to have a final release at some point. You don't want to be constantly patching a single player adventure. And because Hades is a roguelike, the story is already being divvied up between runs. It's not actually that jarring to reach the end of the playtester story and then have to wait for the release day to get it all. It's kind of like you were doing practice runs all throughout your early access. And finally, Supergiant is a small indie studio. While Hades was not their first game, in fact, I highly recommend you try Bastion and Transistor. They're both fantastic. Well, Supergiant is scrappy. They have like 20 employees. The gaming industry is notorious notoriously brutal, and it's only getting harder for small devs, so it's hard to fault them for wanting to crowdsource their quality control. Supergiant had little reputation to lose with early access in the days of Hades 1, but they had everything to gain, which is what made the smash success of that game all the more heartwarming. According to Gamealytics, Hades 1 sold over 10 million copies and brought in about $150 million in revenue. At the time of recording, Hades 2 isn't even fully out yet, and it's already sold 2 million copies, so all this made me wonder, am I in the minority here? Does anyone else feel the same way? I wanted to learn more about Hades fans, so I turned to Reddit and asked them themselves, would Hades 2 be more exciting if it didn't have early access to begin with? I got some great responses. Some commenters did agree with me, but most of them fully embraced the early access model. Some of their comments even reshaped my opinions. For example, the original Hades had 48 patches, while Hades 2 had just 11. That tells us that Supergiant is much more confident in their gameplay development. And honestly, Hades 2 has been fun. I've only played with the initial weapon, but I love the emphasis on witchcraft and spells throughout the game. You have tarot cards, you have cauldrons that hunger for strange ingredients. It's a cool way to differentiate Hades 1 from Hades 2, even though, let's be honest, this is mostly the same game. But frankly, it's been so long for me since that first game that I'm reminded all throughout this experience how gorgeous and slick this take on Greek mythology is. So, is Supergiant Games in the wrong for Hades 2 and early access? No, and it's hard to fault them. As I said, they're doing a lot to differentiate the main character Melinoe from the old Zagreus. You've got new playstyles here, which means an increased demand for game balance. There is a cynical view that Supergiant has become a more notable studio and should therefore be able to pay playtesters, but the truth is, this approach with early access likely leads to a better game than if Supergiant were to go private with it. Hades fans are not only willing to do that work, they're excited for it. I just wish that Supergiant would do something for their early access playtesters, like, I don't know, a special cosmetic skin. They basically paid for the full game at launch and diluted their own experience for the rest of us who waited. These are the dedicated fans who are truly the lifeblood of the gods. So what do you think? Does early access belong in the underworld? What do you think about timed console exclusives in the year 2025? Sure, it's on PC and Switch, but why not release it on PlayStation and Xbox right now? What's up with that? And finally, what has been your Hades 2 gameplay experience? I'm Scoutmaster Demi. Thanks for caring, and we'll see you around the camp.